Elliot Wilson last year went on a campaign about this list, and all of a sudden this year he comes up much more higher than he was last year. I want people to know this listening to me, right? Because I think this is important information. These lists are not really for the people by the people. These lists are for the industry by the industry. And by industry, I mean people who are outside of making the music, living in the conditions of the music, and breaking the music. You're dealing with reactors of music. And so when you talk about my show and some of these shows that are on the other side of the coin when it pertains to this, there should be some space in our understanding, because you've never created it and you don't know what it's like to live in it and you don't know what it's like to break it. But we deal with the people that break records, the people that understand the music, not just react to the music, right? Think it's space for both of those things. You heard Elliott get into it with Kai Cenat about him getting certain looks. You heard some of my commentary about the streaming world and if streaming actually translates, right, for rappers, right? So you sit there, granted, right, is it worth it? It's always, for those of you who do not know, in this industry, there's always a conversation of, is it worth it? And I was interested because somewhere along the line, someone hit a button and everybody said it's worth it for streaming. And so there was a point where I was watching it and trying to figure out, yo, what is this translating? I know people are there. And I know how hard it is to get all these people in one spot. Granted, right? Great. But do they translate? Do they leave this and click that? Do they leave this and talk about that? Do they leave this and buy that? Do they leave this and go to a concert? These were my questions. Is it real value in this transaction with this rapper, or are they just solidifying streaming? This was my commentary. I believe that Elliot Wilson's commentary on Kai Cenat was received as an old dude hating on the young guy. And so now he lives with that. He lives with people constantly bringing up the fact that he's been involved with what can be called hating on Kai Cenat and his whole movement. I truly believe Elliot Wilson looks at Akademiks and what he's done and says, yo, I can do that. I just got to turn it up some. I can actually do that if I turn it up some. I look at what Joe does. I can do that if I turn it up some. I believe these are conversations that he may have with himself. Like, if I turn it up some, I can do that. But you don't want to turn into the avatar of angry. You don't want everyone to look at you and say, that's the avatar angry. Again, the people that's ahead of us, it's always unfortunate and disheartening to come back and play like the little homies. Because what that does is it poisons the pathway. People like Elliott, you poison in the pathway when you come back and do certain things. That's why he had to apologize for what he did with Kai Cenat. See, it took him so long to build this prestige. And it's like, for the sake of the moment right now and to be involved with the conversation now, he's willing to risk everything he's built. Because I don't think you can have it both ways. You can't keep that career as polished as it was and still be involved in it like it is now. You're going to have to sacrifice some of that button up. You're going to have to sacrifice some of that clean cut button up imagery that you've had. And I think he's mishandled that. He's kind of strained his Nicki relationship, strained his Drake relationship. And it's because you're giving these people things that they don't know you for. We didn't build our relationship with you having this kind of behavior, and you didn't build your relationship on your own, and I came to you. And so now this relationship is kind of wacky. But getting back to the list and why I believe that is null and void, like, it's a contradiction. The entire list, for me, if you ask me, is a waste of the man hours that they put into it, which I can tell by the selections of the list and the order of the list and some of the writing on the list that they may have not allotted a lot of time to get this done. So I'll give them that. There's a few things wrong with the list. One, I'll point out, one of the things wrong with the list is Last year you had Joe Budden at number 1. I believe the list to be null and void because if someone is number 1 on a power ranking list, power being the operative word, again, last year I've said this, you have to identify power because there's no way to say I'm as powerful as being number 1 on a power ranking list and then no one else on my couch is nowhere on the list. It's just a contradiction because if I'm powerful, some of my guys will be on the list. Now, last year, let's just put that in question. This year, with Joe Budden being number 2, this makes the list again. The same statement is reintroduced. If Joe Budden is number 2 on a power ranking list for Complex, and he does a show with the same 4 or 5 people every week, he does nothing outside of that show. He does 0 outside of that show. Now, when he done Love and Hip Hop, he done these other shows around it, maybe was on Revolt, all of these other things. All right, you got a sample size of other things. If number two on your list is sitting with 4 other people every single week, 2 times a week, and no one else makes the list, then what do you mean by power? Off of that Complex power ranking, Charlemagne, Elliott. Let's deal with Rollo